we were founded by Gilbert Hitchcock in 1885, and the newspaper really was owned by the Hitchcock family until 1962. And the reason the ownership changed is that in the late 50s, a guy named Henry Dorley, a real famous zoo in Omaha is named after him, he was publisher of the paper, and he died in the late 50s. And the family was really struggling with, do we keep it, do we sell it, and so forth. They had a transaction lined up to sell the newspaper to the Newhouse company, actually. And a local construction company owner named Peter Kiewit bought the newspaper to keep it locally owned. And it ran as a subsidiary of his construction company until he died in 1979. And then an employee ownership plan was implemented, which was the form of ownership until we became part of Berkshire Hathaway in 2011.
Which leads to the next question. Describe what happened in late 2011 and the association.
Well, we had some shareholder liquidity issues, almost like a third-generation family-owned business. We had people who wanted to exit, people who were searching for liquidity at the very time that newspapers were struggling with revenues and earnings and so forth. And we'd gotten through the Great Recession pretty well. We were operating well. We always were profitable. But we really had this sort of lingering balance sheet issue that was out there, and we went to address that, and we were looking for longer-term capital. Long story short, I ended up having a conversation with a gentleman by the name of Walter Scott, who's a former chairman of Peter Kiewit's Sons Incorporated and a very close friend of Warren's.
Warren being Warren Buffett.
And Walter, I did a briefing for him on where we were and so forth, and again, looking for an investment, not looking for a sale. And Walter responded, and he said, I'll leave you with two thoughts. One is, you're doing a lot better than I thought you would be, and two, I'll talk to Warren and I'll see what he thinks. And I hadn't expected the second part of that answer. And about a week or so later, the response came back from Walter that Warren thinks the best way to solve this would be to buy the company. And that took me a little getting used to. In fact, I took the call. I was standing in the middle of Midway Airport coming back from a newspaper meeting, and quickly determined that it was a very smart course. It kept us locally owned. It really fulfilled all the dreams that Mr. Kiewit had when he bought the newspaper in the early 60s. And so we, along with our partners at the Kiewit Foundation, who were part owner of the business, decided that'd be a good course.
So just kind of in layman's terms, how does the company structure work now as far as, it's still Omaha World Herald Company, and explain that a little bit.
Well, we're a wholly owned subsidiary of Berkshire Hathaway, but in terms of the way we operate, it hasn't changed one bit. We still run the newspapers the way we see fit, and we have great access to one of the world's most brilliant minds, but he does not in any way interfere in the way we operate.
I guess first describe in the mid-'80s that the World Herald started purchasing papers in Nebraska and Iowa. Explain what those holdings are now, and then a little bit about the newer acquisitions as of May.
Well, when we became part of Berkshire Hathaway, we had the Omaha World Herald itself, and then we had a group of newspapers we call Midlands Newspapers, which was really a group that starts in Council Bluffs, Iowa, and ends up in Scottsbluff, Nebraska. Several dailies, lots of weeklies. Very nice, high-performing group of newspapers. When we bought, and we announced in May, and we closed subsequent to that, the purchase of the former Media General newspapers, other than Tampa, Florida. That really gave us a whole new presence in the Southeast that we hadn't had before. Very good newspapers, very terrific people running those newspapers. Very nice markets. We're very pleased to do that. We also, at the same time, added a couple of newspapers in Texas that really fit our community newspaper profile in Waco and Bryan College Station, Texas.
So do you have a number how many community newspapers, whether they be daily or non-daily, that are now sister newspapers?
We own 28 daily newspapers and a good number of weeklies. I don't have that number off the top of my head, but a very strong number of weeklies and shoppers outside of those dailies.
So why has Mr. Buffett, other company officials, why is there this positive attitude about the future of newspapers to the point of not only having the purchase of the World Herald, but this additional acquisitions? What's the thinking there?
Well, I think we've said it publicly a number of times, but the connection between a very well-run daily newspaper that's doing its job and a community is very strong. And there's still a very nice business in newspapers. There's no question about that. We think that community newspapers have a unique niche, and we think that's a marketplace of, say, something the size of Omaha and lower than and smaller than that. I would be the first to profess that I don't know much about running a metropolitan newspaper in a giant money center kind of city in New York or Chicago or Los Angeles or something of that ilk. But in terms of community newspapering and the ability to connect with advertisers, connect with readers, connect with the community, that's still alive and well, and that business model really works well, particularly when the sales price, the trading price of newspapers has declined since the Great Recession of 2008. So the acquisition price is lower, and therefore the investment model is a little bit stronger.
So, being that these are community newspapers, and every community is unique, every newspaper would have its unique qualities, but are there a few things that all of these newspapers would have in common that make them, your definition of a community newspaper?
I think I think it is a case by case. I think they're very unique things, and very unique businesses, very unique assets, if you will. And so we don't profess that every community has things that are the same. For example, we now own the paper in Richmond, Virginia. I don't profess to know much about what's going on in Virginia, Richmond politics, or the city council, or the school board, or things like that, just as the publisher there doesn't know much about Omaha politics. And so we rely on strong local managers, local publishers, local editors, local sales managers to run those businesses.
So overall, what is the future for newspapers, and how do we define the newspaper of the future? You know, the newspaper of the past has been a print product pretty much exclusively, but how do newspapers have to look to have that positive future that's worth investing in?
We think that the printed newspaper is going to continue well into the foreseeable future. I don't see the end of it. Having said that, though, we're of a belief that we have to be very good at producing news, advertising, information, entertainment, whatever the content mechanism is, in whatever form our readers wish to consume it. So if it's on print, we need to be very good at that. If it's on a smartphone, we need to be good at that. If it's on a tablet, we need to be good at that. And as I say, if the next step is holograms in the middle of this table, we need to be good at that as well. But it really goes back to the credible, reliable, timely gathering of information and disseminating that in such a way that it's useful to our readers and it's accessible in a way they'd like to access it.
So the core thing that good newspapers have been all along, telling stories, gathering news, providing advertisers a venue to get their information out, that's still the same?
I think so. We need to be good. We need to produce results for our readers and for our advertisers.
So, is the thing that newspapers should aspire to be, if they see one of those delivery systems, for instance, that is maybe not first rate, or if they reevaluate their news gathering, or that is that where newspapers have to be vigilant, and maybe if there are changes to be made, just be sure that all of those elements are first rate. The gathering.
I think I would approach it more as a little more measured than that. For the efforts we're putting forth and the money we're spending in terms of news gathering, news dissemination, news content, advertising content, are we being rewarded with audience? If you have the world's greatest website in terms of technology and there's nothing interesting on it, my guess is that not very many people are going to go there. Conversely, if you have the world's greatest content and it's really interesting and everybody wants to see it, but you don't have the infrastructure so that people can get to it, either through print, online, mobile, whatever your distribution method is, then probably nobody's going to be able to see it because they can't get to it. So we've got to be good at both. We've got to gather it and we've got to get it to people in an affordable, easy to access kind of way, easy to use. And that's the other thing I think that newspapers are getting better at doing, but we've been behind, and that is being easy to do business with. Is easy so that a person who can run a computer and get email can run your system. They don't have to be a technological person to do so.
And Mr. Buffett talked about this, I think, in November a little bit about how, and he's obviously the ultimate businessman, that newspapers as a whole have been giving away their products via internet and not found a good, many of them not found a good way to, get rewarded monetarily for what they're putting out there. Is that also a change that is maybe coming more universally?
I think it's here. We're newspapers. It really isn't that the technology platform isn't so good. It's that we've lacked the courage to charge for our products. So shame on us, and we need to fix that. I had one of our World Herald scholars came back and wanted to visit with me about his career. He goes to Yale, and he made the statement while sitting in my office that he thought that newspaper paywalls were off-putting, was the way he put it. And I asked him, I said, is that so? I asked him if I could just ask him one question. I asked him if iTunes constituted a paywall. He said, well, no, that's different. That's a store. And I asked him, how is it that it's okay for Bruce Springsteen to protect his intellectual property, but it's not okay for the Omaha World Herald to protect its intellectual property? And I think that as newspapers get more courageous about charging for and protecting their intellectual property, I think we're going to be a lot better off. Because if you spend millions of dollars to gather something or produce something and then give it away, I wasn't the greatest business student in the world, but that's not very smart. So we've got to do better at that as an industry.
Would you expect that your company would look to add more papers, short-term, long-term? Is that door
I think
open?
we're still very interested in good values and newspapers that make sense for us. Not everyone will, but yes, we're very much still in the hunt for growing our business.
So, again, I think I told you that we've all been to conferences where we've heard that newspapers have no future. The print version, at least, is going to go the way of the dinosaur. There's just no future there. How do you respond to those opinions?
I'm not swayed to that point of view, and I think it's going to be a blended business. It's going to be a mix of print and multiple digital forms of distribution. And again, I know what the forms are today. I'm not smart enough to figure out what they're going to be in the next 2 or 3 or 5 years, but I think they will evolve as it's evolved very rapidly so far. But I think a piece of that is going to be the printed newspaper.
You're younger than I am, but how how much would you miss the print version if you didn't have the print version of a newspaper?
You know, I would miss it a lot, but I'm probably not. I think I would confess that I'm biased, so I'm probably not the right guy to ask. What I would tell you is that I'd point to my 18-year-old daughter, who is going to be a freshman in college. She's as technologically savvy as they all are, and does all the uses Twitter and uses Facebook, and I'm more likely to get a response from her if I text her than if I call her. So we all know that equation. She had some success in high school swimming this last season, and we were very proud of her. The fact that when she saw what was in the printed newspaper, it mattered. That her picture was in the newspaper. It was online, but it was clearly more important to her when it was in the paper. And I've seen that from other families with people, kids who have accomplished things, and they want to brag about it. They know it's online, and you can print that out. But there's something special about having something in the newspaper. And I think that is going to continue as we go forward. And it's going to be a struggle for the printed word. There's no question about it. We're going to have to work harder at it. But I don't think it's going away, because it's still special.
I guess, finally, do you think that positive attitude that you have, and certainly that Mr. Buffett and Berkshire Hathaway has shown, have you gotten inquiries from others? I mean, is that rubbing off on other people, changing any minds, do you suppose?
I don't know. I think that Warren would tend to have more of a influence on people than I would, but appropriately so. But I think that he sees a business that has a lot of value, has a future, and if it's not rubbing off on people, I think that's disappointing, but not shocking. I mean, human beings are skeptical by their nature, and it'll take some people will have to see some proof in the pudding, I think.
And maybe this company is providing it.
Well, we hope we're being helpful.